declares David Leon of the All Progressives Congress winner of Bayelsa governorship election to continue collation of Kogi governorship election results by 9 o'clock this morning.
President Buhari congratulates Governor-elect of Bayelsa State.
INEC declares Kogi West senatorial rerun inconclusive.
On Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall take a look at the Bayelsa and Kogi elections as well as the national campaign against open defecation.
The off-cycle governorship elections in Bayelsa and Kogi states held over the weekend, and the Independent National Electoral Commission has already announced David Leon of the All Progressives Congress winner of Bayelsa governorship election, while the electorate in Kogi State is eagerly awaiting the final collation of results and the declaration of a winner by INEC later today.
And that's, of course, Kieran, we also hear that the INEC has declared the Kogi West senatorial rerun election inconclusive prior to the polls. The political atmosphere in the two states was quite tense, with several appeals coming from President Muhammadu Buhari and various bodies against making the elections a do-or-die affair or a theater of war.
That's true indeed, Rhoda. The tension was so high,
really high.
That the Nigerian police force alone deployed over 66,000 personnel to both states to ensure the maintenance of law and order during the elections.
That's true, Kieran. That alone underscored the scale of violence that was anticipated, and that put the Nigerian police force and other security agencies on red alerts to gather sufficient intelligence and put all logistics measures in place to guard against violence in both states.
Yeah, but good enough. The electorate, according to reports, turned out in large numbers to vote in the governorship elections in Bayelsa and Kogi, although with some skirmishes of violence as well as incidents of delayed voting recorded in some areas.
The Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, acknowledged cases of thuggery and violence in some parts of Kogi and Bayelsa states, which the Commission condemned in very strong terms, saying it will investigate the isolated cases of violence in both Bayelsa and Kogi states.
Now, it is not clear yet what action INEC will take on those areas that experienced thuggery and other electoral vices. But by and large, and apart from isolated cases, the Kogi and Bayelsa elections were largely peaceful as Nigerians in the two states turned out en masse to cast their ballot for the candidates of their choice.
And certainly the electorates in both states have spoken through the ballots, and Nigerians are waiting to see the disposition of the winners and losers. On Good Morning Nigeria today, we'll be having a post-mortem of the governorship elections in Kogi and Bayelsa states, and of course not forgetting the senatorial polls which also took place in Kogi West. I'm Rhoda Anon. I'm welcoming you to the program. We're broadcasting live on the network service of the NTA from our studios here in Abuja, the nation's capital.
And I am Kieran Umayo. Thank you for joining us for a fresh edition of Good Morning Nigeria this Monday. Just to let you know, we shall have a second conversation on national campaign against open defecation. And as usual, we have to serve you the complementary segments of the program, which will include a newspaper review, business, sports, and others. For now, let's join our colleague Nolene Abel Ame for this morning's early news. Hello, Nolene.
Hi, Kieran. Good morning to you and Rhoda. Good morning, Nigeria. Here is the news. The candidate of the All Progressives Congress, APC, Mr. David Leon, has won the November 16 governorship election in Bayelsa State. The APC candidate polled a total of 352,552 votes to defeat his closest rival and candidate of the People's Democratic Party, PDP, Mr. Doi Diri, who scored 143,172 votes. INEC's returning officer for the Bayelsa governorship election and Vice-Chancellor of the University of Benin, Professor Faraday Orunwese, on Monday morning returned Leon as the winner of the keenly contested election after scoring the highest number of votes in the poll.
Leon David Perewo Rimini of APC, having satisfied the requirements of the law, is hereby declared the winner and returned elected. Thank you, and God bless you.
Meanwhile, collation and announcement of results for the Kogi governorship election will resume by 9 a.m. later this morning. From the results released so far, the All Progressives Congress APC is in a comfortable lead in Kogi State. President Muhammadu Buhari congratulates most warmly the All Progressives Congress APC governorship candidate in the November 16 election in Bayelsa State, David Leon, on his impressive victory. President Buhari also commends APC supporters in particular and Nigerians in general in the state who exercised their civic rights in a peaceful manner, notwithstanding the pockets of unrest recorded in some locations. Condemning the loss of lives in Bayelsa, particularly prior to the election, the president commiserates with the families of the victims. According to President Buhari, violence during elections vitiates our commitment to demonstrate to the world and upcoming generation that we are a people capable of electing leaders in a peaceful and orderly manner. He notes that while officials of the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, and security agencies did their best within the ambit of the law to ensure free, fair, and credible elections, it is unfortunate that pockets of unrest, mostly sponsored by desperate politicians, were recorded during the poll. The president looks forward to working with the incoming government to improve the lives of the people in Bayelsa State while ensuring the security of lives and property of all citizens. President Buhari urges Governor-elect Leon to carry other divergent interests along in the next phase of governance, imploring those not satisfied with the outcome of the poll to seek redress through the constitutionally established channels. Meanwhile, the Independent National Electoral Commission INEC says all ad hoc staff posted to Olamaboro local government area of Kogi State for the governorship election are safe, sound, and back in their respective homes. Chief Press Secretary to the INEC National Chairman, Rotimi Oyekomi, in a statement, says the clarification became necessary following reports from some sections of the media that 30 ad hoc staff of the commission are missing in Olamaboro local government area of Kogi State. The statement adds that the chairman of INEC, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, has personally spoken with some of the ad hoc staff. The call for an urgent passage and implementation of an Electoral Offences Commission law to address all issues related to electoral abuse took center stage at the presentation of the Nigeria Civil Society Situation Room's report on its observation of the Bayelsa and Kogi states' off-season governorship elections.
Voters were not deterred by pre-election day anxiety, threats of violence, and turnout in their numbers.
At watching the vote is for all Nigerians, beholden to no one and driven by data.
Away from politics to health now, the federal government interventions in the health sector may not yield required results if health providers are not adequately trained on healthcare delivery. Consequently, the federal government is partnering the Qatar Center Atlanta to train middle and low-level manpower in the health sector. This is a major fallout of the review meeting where stakeholders discussed key accomplishments since the inception of the partnership.
We had 8 successful bats. So this is not good for our country considering our population. So the aim is to train, increase number of health workforce with full capacity building on pedagogical method of training.
Troops of Operation Lafia Dole have rescued an 80-year-old man, 3 women and 4 children from Boko Haram captivity. A statement by the Nigerian Army Operations Media Coordinator, Colonel Aminu Ilyasu, indicates that the victims were held by the terrorists at Dalu village in Mandara Mountains of Goza local government area of Borno State. The Nigerian Army notes that the operations conducted by troops of 26th Task Force Brigade subdued the criminals who fled in this area with injuries. And that concludes the news segment of Good Morning Nigeria. It will be back with Rhoda and Kinsley shortly. Thank you.
The new edition of TV Guide is out, exclusively taking a look at the traditional television and new media. Are they comparable or complementary? Media industry players give perspective on the trends, progress, challenges, and the way forward. Find out on this compelling edition of TV Guide. Expository interviews with stars of the team within our space. Becky Madajemo of NTA, Utibe Umore of AIT, Nifemi Oguntai of TVC, and a host of others. TV Guide, your indispensable companion. Also feature Iya Medina.
I'm the CEO, managing director of Iya Medina Sister Restaurant. I choose to serve. Shut up your mouth. Let me finish.
A TV drama series on NTA. Let's get to meet the characters behind Iya Medina. This edition also presents exciting features on tourism, culture, entertainment, sports, health, and lots more. Grab a copy at the vendors near you or any NTA station nationwide. TV Guide, your indispensable companion.
Helpline Foundation Nigeria and partners present the 3rd Annual Africa Women Conference AWC 2019, a gathering of experts, institutions, corporate organizations, and individuals promoting the growth, stability, and development of African women, through which various resources available to African women can be channeled towards the sustainable development of the continent.
Keynote speakers: Dame Paul Talen, Ramato Tijani Aliu, Madam Magdala Cooper, Binta Masigarba, Karima Ranim, Ibtisame Azao, Dr. Anissa Nagra, veteran Nollywood actors and actresses.
Theme: Building a Coalition to End Gender Inequality in Africa. Date: 21st to 23rd November 2019. Venue: Kenzi Manara Palace, Marrakesh, Morocco. For participation and inquiries, visit www.africa-womenconference.org or call +234 806 5388424. AWC, building an Africa where every woman's potential is fully harnessed. Powered by Helpline Foundation Nigeria, Echoes Africa Initiatives New York, International Center for Diplomacy, Morocco.
This year, like every other year, for over a decade, we celebrate and reward African creatives around the world at the African Academy Awards ZAFA 2019 in Abuja, Nigeria. The second homecoming event is a 3-day gathering of industry stakeholders and enthusiasts to network as well as encourage and motivate budding talents. The movie screenings, exhibitions, and masterclasses will hold at the Silverbird Galleria on the 22nd to 23rd November 2019. The awards and gala night on the 24th of November 2019 at the prestigious Transcorp Hilton Hotel Abuja. For inquiries and sponsorship, advert placements, and tickets, call the following numbers on your screen now or visit www.zafa.org.
This is wonderful.
I'm super excited about it. Nothing is expected of them other than awesomeness.
ZAFA 2019. Come expecting the unexpected.
The Honorable Minister of Information and Culture, Alhaji Lai Mohammed, cordially invites the general public to the 2019 Abuja Carnival, taking place between 23rd and 25th November 2019. Theme: Culture for Peace. Street Carnival and opening ceremony, Saturday 23rd November 2019. Venue from Old Parade Ground to Area 1 Abuja. Time from 8 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. Other cultural activities on display are Children's Fiesta at GSS Area 10 Garki Abuja, Durba at Kuje Stadium, Boat Regatta at Jabi Dam, Masquerade Fiesta at Government Day Secondary School Gwagwalada, Traditional Cuisine Fair and Bush Bar at Old Parade Ground, Command Performance and Award Night, as well as Contemporary Music Fiesta at the Old Parade Ground from 23rd to 25th November 2019. Time from 8:30 p.m. till dawn daily. Deaconess Grace Isu Gekbe, Permanent Secretary, Federal Minister of Information and Culture, announcer.
You can choose to manage everything else, but not your data. Get more out of life with the new Airtel data plans. Dial *141# today. Data is life.
Airtel, the smartphone network.
Hello and welcome back. Thank you for joining us. And just in case you've just joined us, you're watching Good Morning Nigeria. Now, let's talk business. With the right technology and incredible products, digital marketing is said to have the capacity to improve national economic growth and development. Plus, Nigeria's informal sector can contribute immensely to tax regime if properly harnessed. Let's now join Kolo Mohammed on Business News.
Rise in position on the ease of doing business ladder by Nigeria and the recent World Bank's rating of income status in Nigeria. The use of information communication technologies, ICT, for sustainable approach in business in ways suggestive of absence of infrastructure and other inputs that make doing business slightly rigid has been identified as a sure way to arrive at the peak of public and private business in Nigeria.
But Nigeria has to prepare. Everything is going electronic, e-commerce, e-government, and all of that. And so we need to prepare ourselves. But I think that the beginning of that preparation is to stop whatever is going on at the multilateral level so that we don't jump into speed, but come back home first, prepare ourselves, and then meet up with others at the end of the day.
When you talk about globalization, you're talking about a huge market. And there is one mantra that everybody speaks in globalization. What is it? Market share. Okay, so for you to be able to get a share of this market, there are three things you need to have. One is that you need to have the skill. Two is that you need to have the technology. Three is that you need to have the products.
Fatima Binta Muhammad, a digital marketer, aligns the gains of digital marketing to national growth and economic development.
If you're a farmer and you sell yam and maybe somebody wants your yam in Lagos, it's a very easy way to transport your yam. They see your yam online, they check out your yam, you are credible online, you check out your credibility rates and you sell your product.
And the week's proceedings on the floor of the Nigerian stock market opens today. And as always, NTA Business News will bring you closing figures subsequently. Those are the notes upon which we open our business reportage for the week. My name is Kolo Mohammed. See you again soon.
Thank you, Kolo Mohammed, for that report. We appreciate that. Now, next on Good Morning Nigeria is a review of some of today's national dailies.
Bayo Atoyobi is in the studio as always to give us more insight into our review this morning. Bayo, good morning.
Good morning, Rhoda. Good morning.
How's the weekend?
Good morning,
Bayo.
Nigeria. Weekend was good. Monitoring the election was very interesting.
Very, very interesting, I must confess. All right, Bayo, let's begin with the Daily Trust.
Okay, Daily Trust newspaper. Let's turn to Daily Trust newspaper. Below the nameplate, why APC, PDP lawmakers are working together in National Assembly. That's according to Lawan. I read that story on page 13 of Daily Trust. 9 months after launch, new e-passport yet to commence in states. That's on page 3. And the lead story this morning on Daily Trust, governorship elections, that's the kicker. PDP kicks as APC wins Bayelsa, leads in Kogi. With a rider, Smart Adeyemi leads in Kogi West senatorial rerun. Of course, we've had that election is inconclusive. Now, at the bottom of the Daily Trust newspaper, we have other headlines here. Gunmen kill 5 hunters in Adamawa village. The story is captured on page 3. Federal government plans to criminalize open defecation. It's on page 7. Female Muslim students have constitutional right to use hijab. That's on page 6.
All right, let's quickly take the Daily Sun. Daily Sun, ex-Justice Minister Adoke arrested in Dubai. Ex-Justice Minister Adoke arrested in Dubai. That's on page 6, and it's just beside the picture, the nameplate of the Daily Sun. And the lead story this morning on the Daily Sun, APC leads in Kogi, Bayelsa, and with riders there. Police confirm 3 dead in Kogi, 30 missing INEC staff found. Monitors accuse security personnel, political parties of truncating exercise. Collection of remaining results continue today. That's the lead story and the riders to the lead story there on page 45. And of course, down you see the picture story there of President Muhammadu Buhari on his arrival from London after a short break during the weekend. Below that, you'd see gunmen kill 4, injure 3 policemen in Katsina, Imo. 600 billion naira debt. Gencos threatened to shut down power supply. That's on page 37. And on 41, why we are at war with Obaseki, says APC chieftain. It's a battle for dominance, liberation between Oshomole and Obaseki, says Commissioner. Those are the stories on the front page of the Daily Sun. But let me quickly take the blueprint so that you can give us more depth into most of the stories. On the blueprint, we have here, blackout looms as Gencos threatened power generation shut down. And if you come down, kidnapped Kaduna lecturers escape from captors. That's on page 13. And the lead story there, Bayelsa Kogi polls, APC coasting home with riders. Leon Bello ahead with declared results. Collation suspended in Kogi till Monday. 30 missing ad hoc staff, Hale and Hurty, says INEC. Young Africa blames politicians, others on polls challenges. Police Commission thumbs up security. That's on page 6, and that's the lead story. Now let's go to the footer of the paper. And I said zoning major costs of graft in Nigeria, and that's on page 5. NAFDAC sales 47 bakeries, water factories in Bronu. That's on page 5. NMDC will revolutionary. Okay. NMDC LL will revolutionize Nigeria's economy, says DG. And police declares 38-year-old Faladay wanted. That's on page 17. The last one, the hijab, demand your rights within the law. Sultan urges Nigerians. That's on page 6. Those are the lead stories on the blueprint this morning. RMIO. Let's begin with the elections in Bayelsa.
Yes, indeed, elections are the talk of the nation now. But the Independent National Electoral Commission has declared the All Progressive Congress governorship candidate, David Leon, winner of the Saturday election in Bayelsa. The returning officer, Professor Faraday Ounwese of University of Benin, announced that All Progressive Congress pulled 352,552 votes, winning in 6 local governments, while the People's Democratic Party pulled 143,172 votes, winning in 2 local governments. But the collation of results for Kogi State is to continue this morning. The returning officer and Vice Chancellor of the Ahmadu Bello University, Professor Ibrahim Umoru, announced the continuation, 9 o'clock today. The results of 10 local governments that have, the results of 19 local governments released so far shows that All Progressive Congress had won in 10 local governments, while the People's Democratic Party has won in 9 local governments. Results of the 2 local governments that are expected are Lokoja and Abaji, and they are expected to announce after collation today. Meanwhile, the senatorial election for Kogi West, the rerun, indicates that the election was inconclusive. The lead margin between Senator Smart Adeyemi, who polled 80,118 votes, as against Senator Dino Melaye, who polled 59,548 votes, is lower than the 43,127, which is the number of registration of voters in the 53 polling units and 20 registration area. The returning officer, Professor Olaide Lawal, declared the result inconclusive. He says INEC will subsequently announce a date for supplementary election. But there were concerns about violence on the election both in Kogi and Bayelsa, and it is very worrying, the development. In spite of INEC's announced and timers planning for the election, unfortunately, election did not start on time. INEC confirmed that 90% of the 254 polling units and over 3,000 voting points in Kogi State had their material delivered on time. 80% of such was what was delivered in Bayelsa. Former President Goodluck Jonathan, for instance, could not vote at his Otuoke vote until 11:45 a.m. And after voting, he remarked that he had the opportunity of being an election monitor in other nations. And when the election starts there, it starts promptly at 8 o'clock. And so we must learn how to start elections at the time given. However, the electoral officer in charge of the Otuoke gave an explanation. He said on Friday evening, people from the community came to demonstrate and protest that they don't want their polling unit where it has been located. And so INEC had to wait until Friday morning before relocating electoral material to the selected polling unit. And that was why it had to be delayed up to that time. But be that as it may, there were reported violence in several locations. In Bayelsa, materials were stolen at Otua. Also at East Boman, there were reports of electoral officers who said that they had to be forced under duress to collate results. In Nembe and Brass, there were no cancellations of the results that were announced, and it appeared to have been peaceful. But in Yenegua, there were reports of violence that showed. In Kogi State, a similar atmosphere prevailed. There were pockets of violence across. There was violence in Iloku and Ayetoro. In fact, in Ayetoro, in one area, thugs invaded the polling booth, asked for the election results, and took that of the governorship, tore it into pieces, and left them with only those of the senatorial elections. The question now is, if the police had deployed about 31,000 to Bayelsa and about 35 to Kogi, how was it so easy for thugs to pervade the whole places?
That's a question that is actually begging for answers. All through the weekend, that was a question I kept asking. With the pictures that were coming up on social media, on TV even, as to the snatching of ballot boxes, materials being destroyed at polling units, you wonder where are the 36,000 policemen?
Prior to the election, we had a DCP, here, and we also had a conversation on the strategies being put in place by the police. And he assured Nigerians, that a lot of intelligence, have been gathered, in both states. And there are flashpoints, which of course intelligence report, indicated, and that they have made frantic efforts to ensure that those areas are closely monitored, Yet, what we saw was the usual election violence that plays out in all our elections in this country. This is not new. It's not new. I envisaged that, but I was just thinking, let that be on a high side. Let the preponderance not to be, such that will overwhelm the entire election. But what we have today is usually what we normally experience in elections.
But Kiran, we experience that a lot of times largely based on the political actors themselves in the states. But then, I thought with the last general elections and that of 2015, we were growing past what we saw in these elections, because what we saw in these elections was a bit, just as you said, it's a bit more than what we used to see in 2015 and in the last elections. I don't think it was as bad as what we saw in these elections.
Now, the Police Service Commission deliberately put in a committee to monitor the elections. And what is their report? They say their report indicate that the police and the security agencies perform optimally. But what happened with the thuggery that dominated the place? Well, the politicians has prepared the ground. Look at the strategy. The police, the INEC says that police is the only instrument for maintaining security. Police are not allowed to carry arms around polling units. And therefore, a policeman is there, he's not even armed with a baton. So thugs come into polling units with arms. Do you want the policeman to risk his life to face a man who is carrying arms?
Well, Bayo, that's actually one major part of our program this morning. We're going to deliberate on that, this morning. But with respect to the issue of police not carrying arms within the polling unit, one of our colleagues, Makud Simon Macham, did tell us some time ago when he covered an election in one of the African nations that, look, what they do is that the policemen that stay at the polling units are heavily armed. It doesn't stop you from going to vote. Because if anybody tries to perpetuate any kind of electoral vices, of course you cannot do that there because there is properly policed, armed police. But in our case, you say, no, don't bring police there. It will scare the voter. But how are you scaring voters? We've been living with policemen, we've been living with the military, for all our lives. Why would it be on election day and they will scare you from voting? They can come and vote and go. And that will, to some extent, reduce the level of violence we'll be experiencing in our elections. So now let's talk of other issues, like we raised this morning from the newspapers.
Yes, there's one by Genco are now threatening that they will cease to supply power. This is because they are owned as much as 600 billion. And they put the total blame completely on one agency that is known as NEBET, that is Nigeria Bulk Electricity Trading Company. And what they are alleging is that the electricity bulk purchasing company is refusing to make payment to them as they demand. They have supplied electricity, but the NBET is asking them to pay 7.75% charge as what they describe as administrative charges. And the Gen and Transmission Company says they are not prepared to pay that because it is an extortion. And they are calling out the Nigeria Electricity Regulatory Commission to step in, otherwise they will have to be forced to shut shop. And that was a report that Rhoda read about the darkness looming because the Gencos are threatening to withdraw their services.
Well, let's take our editorial. Bye.
All right, Bayo, our editorial this morning is coming from Leadership newspaper, as on page 3 of a Leadership newspaper. It says States and Pension Payment. That has become an enigma, if you ask me, because I know that many in states have never collected even their what do they call it? The one they give you after retirement, gratuity, let alone pension. Bayo, what do you make of the situation?
You see, most states are still functioning under the old pension scheme, and the old pension scheme was such a problem that the new pension scheme, which started in 2004, is a contributory pension scheme. The employer makes a percentage contribution. You, the worker, also make contribution. Therefore, you have the opportunity of having an account and knowing what your contributions are. By the time you leave, those who started under the old pension scheme had what they call a bond that is saved for them in the central bank. This is pulled together and they pay to pensioners. Therefore, under the new pension scheme, workers ought not to have any problem. But in most of the states, out of the 36 states of the Federation and the FCT, I think less than 15 states have actually adopted this new pension scheme. And that is why the problem of pension is still a big challenge with the states. And therefore, you're still going to have the issue of preponderance and delay in paying gratuities for workers. And it's not fair in the sense that people have used their youthful part of their life to work in services of the nation. When they are no longer able to help and work for themselves, they are supposed to enjoy their pension. And the sad thing is that this pension is not forthcoming. And if we are to go by the example of the PENCOM, which is now mining the pension commission, the pension scheme under the new contributory pension, PENCOM now has an asset of about 9.4 trillion. In fact, of recent, there have been proposals to government that instead of government looking for resources and borrowing money everywhere, they can even fall back and borrow from the assets of the PENCOM. Although my fear is that I hope in future it won't be an obstacle for pensioners. But however, that is to tell you the kind of security that the new pension scheme has brought on board. And if the states are to adopt that, then we will overcome that cycle of pensioners not being paid.
I think one managerial difficulty that we have experienced in this country is the fact that there are some federal government policies and programs that many states have refused to adopt. It's not just in pension, even in health, in education. Those that are concurrent in the Constitution, they feel that doing whatever they feel they have to do, but they've forgotten that the greater number of Nigerians are living in the states. The majority of Nigerians are living in the states, and whatever program that does not affect those sections of Nigerians, of course, that means that the majority are not benefiting from federal government programs and policies.
That's
at this point, we'd like to ask Bayo to leave and thank him also for his contribution. Bayo, we're going to see you again tomorrow.
Thank you too.
All right, now, Good About Nigeria continues in just a moment.
They are there at the crack of dawn. They are there busy preparing while we rise for our day. They are there silently, guarding, waiting, listening, and watching. They are there ready in the sky above and the waters below, in the blistering heat of the day, in the dead of night, willing, indefatigable, determined in the defense of the sovereignty of our country. They are our first line of defense and our last. They who have paid the ultimate price in defending us. They are fathers and uncles. They are mothers and sisters and girlfriends and boyfriends. They are brothers and cousins and best friends and neighbors. They are classmates, colleagues, and citizens of this nation. They are our defenders and deserve our respect, our prayers, our thoughts. Nigeria, please support our armed forces.
20 years of travel and counting. 20 years of promoting tourism in Africa and diaspora. Over 3 million kilometers traveled. Over 30 African countries visited. Explored the diaspora in 4 continents. Connected over 100,000 happy tourists to Africa. Reached over 50 million homes. Igniting smiles across Africa and beyond. As Kogi Africa turns 20, we thank you and invite you to join us in the quest for 20 must-visit destinations in partnership with the largest TV network in Africa, the NDA, Ministry of Information and Culture, Ministry of Transportation, Lagos State Government, Canon, Delta Airlines, Royal Caribbean, Tour Brokers International. You too can still be a partner. Call the numbers on your screen or info@gogeafrica.tv. Kogi Africa, celebrating 2 decades of heritage, travel and tourism.
Son, being good at something requires strength. It requires pushing yourself. It requires putting in more. That's why the new improved Bornvita is packed with vitality and a great taste.
Not so fast. Look, I'm tired. I want to check out of this country for greener pastures.
Just calm down for a moment. Please sit down.
Do you have a job where you're going to?
No, but someone is arranging,
Listen, Alinko. Checking out of this country without proper planning means one thing. Unimaginable begin. You know, I've been in the diaspora, but legitimately doing great things at home and abroad. As I've been saying, without the proper footing abroad, the risk is not worth it. Listen, Alinko, it's better to be home than be trapped abroad or even end up in prison.
Welcome back, and if you've just joined us, you're watching Good Morning Nigeria, and we're live on the network service of the NTA. Our first conversation this morning will be on the Bayelsa and Kogi elections, but we have our guest already seated here in the studio to, of course, do a postmortem on the election results that has been announced and the one we're still expecting. But first, let's take the announcement of the Bayelsa governorship election results that was announced early on in the early parts of this morning. Let's see if we can take that.
Leon David Rimini of APC, having satisfied the requirements of the law, is hereby declared a winner and returned elected. Thank you, and God bless you all.
Well, that's a jubilation after the announcement of Bayelsa state election earlier today. And right here in the studio, we have guests to, of course, do some justice to discussions relating to what happened over the weekend and the announcement that we are expecting. And first of all, we'd like to introduce Rotimi Oyekome. Rotimi Oyekome is the Chief Press Secretary to INEC Chairman. We're glad to have you.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
And of course, Professor Nuhu Yakubu, he's a familiar face on this program. He's a political scientist and former Vice Chancellor of the University of Abuja. It will also be nice to, sir, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's also nice to inform you that we had earlier invited the DCP, Frank Mba, to be part of this program this morning. But of course, call for duty has actually made it impossible for him to be here this morning. We'd just like you to know that, because of course we would like to take some issues concerning security during the elections. Ruda.
All right, gentlemen, let's begin the conversation by looking at, first of all, the people, the turnout of voters during this election. How would you describe the turnout of electorates in Bayelsa and Kogi for this election as compared to other elections that took place before now? Rotimi Oyekome, let's get your thoughts first.
Thank you very much. Poor turnout has always been a recurring decimal in our elections, in spite of the fact that we had 96% PVC collection rate in both 92 in Kogi and 96 in Bayelsa. And one would have expected that we will have at least 50% of those who collected the PVCs coming out to vote. But don't forget that these two states also witnessed incidences of violence, which may have discouraged people from coming out to vote, because you need a peaceful atmosphere for you to be able to go to the polling unit and cast your ballot. We had rumors that some people, out of fear, actually left the state. I can't verify that, it's not verifiable yet, but it's part of what influences the election. This is an election we planned for, we announced far back in May, and the date of the election was fixed, and all the activities were observed, and we expected that people will come out. but it's not just peculiar to these two elections. I think more needs to be done to persuade people to come out en masse, because the more people participate, the better is it for the country.
Yeah, let's bring in a prof here, along the same line of voter turnout in both elections, considering the antecedents of both states when it comes to elections. Are you surprised that we didn't have the kind of turnout that was expected by INEC, for instance?
Well, let me start by noting that the newspaper reports we got indicated by some of the papers that the turnout was fairly okay. But I'm surprised that it is also a different narrative now, that the turnout was very poor. And just as the Chief Secretary to INEC Chairman has said, people will not want to risk their lives unnecessarily. So I think caution is a better part of valor, as it is often stated. So they decided to stay at home. I think the election administration, or the process of voting, especially on election day, is something that we really need to consider very seriously in this country. I really don't understand why democratic politics, which is meant to be it's like, one could actually think of it as a market kind of situation. People, there are so many products in the market. Then politicians are supposed to come with ideas, and for electors to choose which ideas they think will be of benefit to them. And therefore, it should be something that is peaceful. But unfortunately, the pattern of election, especially in Nigeria, is assuming a dimension that should worry any person. Even if it's not worrying the politician, but it should worry everybody, particularly the voters. Because at the end of the day, it's not the politicians that actually suffer the consequence of disorderliness or violence, but the electorate.
Okay, Chief Party Secretary, let me ask you this. Now, prior to this election, we hosted Mr. Uzi, also from INEC, on this program, and he actually stipulated that INEC has made all the necessary plans and all logistics in place, all materials in place, before this election. But what played out, in your opinion, in the two elections? Were you satisfied with the extent of work done by INEC, and of course the results you are getting from your field officers?
Thank you very much. You are quite right. We made adequate plans for the elections, right from the time we released the timetable and schedule of activities. 14 activities listed, everything followed up religiously. We hired enough number of ad hoc staff and trained them. We deployed smart card readers. We signed MOUs with individual transport owners. In the case of Bayelsa, boat owners and vehicle owners, and in the case of Kogi, the same thing. We also tried to open up the polling unit at 8 a.m. We achieved that in a number of governorship elections, across the board, but unfortunately, we couldn't achieve 100% opening of polls at 8 a.m. across the two states due to some challenges, some of which are well narrated in the media. But I think that by 10 o'clock, we've had over 80% of our polling units open in the two states. On issues of security, the commission is saddled with the responsibility of conducting the election, but the responsibility of securing the environment is that of the security agency, and in this case, the Nigerian police. Now, we have a forum where we meet with the security agencies, and adequate plans were made in that respect. In fact, the commission carried out its own risk assessment and shared the details with the security agencies. The police too and other sister agencies carried out their own risk assessment, and our understanding is that it was based on the harmonization of these two narratives that they deployed personnel and made arrangements for the elections. And even though violence played out in some areas, one would have expected that with all this arrangement, nothing like that will happen. But then we should also think that if those arrangements were not made, maybe things will have been much worse than we have it now. And these two states have a history of this kind of scenario that played out during the election. But I think that even all the observer reports that we have received, people have not criticized INEC on the aspect of the conduct of the election. The smart card readers have not had narratives that they were any functioning. People have not complained about smart card readers. And I think that to a large extent, we delivered on what we are supposed to do.
All right, Professor Yakubu, let's get your take on the conduct of the elections. What's your assessment of INEC on these two elections?
Well, I didn't observe, so my analysis will be based on what I read in the paper and what I discussed with also a number of people. I think basically this time around INEC could be given a pass mark in terms of the deployment of materials for the election. But the problem is still the issue of the coordination that is required between INEC and the security forces. Because the basic issue about the election that took place in these two states is that of violence. The extent of violence or violent behavior that took place and what is to be done. I think this is what should actually be the concern of government, politicians, political parties, and their leaders, as well as the generality of Nigerian people. Why should violence characterize our elections? Especially when we also notice that in a number of countries, even third world countries, these elections take place very peacefully. Is it that we have all, have come to the conclusion that except we, combine our own election with violence, we're not going to get the result that we're looking for. And I think likely the blame should lie squarely also with the politicians. They are the ones that are desperate to make sure that they get to the office. But and I keep on wondering, are you going to preside over dead bodies or to provide leadership to dead people? Or you are there to go and render service? And if you are rendering services, who are you rendering services to? The electorate or members of your family only? Because sometimes you also discover that when this violence escalates, it doesn't even affect members of their families. Okay? It is the poor people, the innocent people, people who actually genuinely want to see that their votes will count, that get bottled up in the violence situation that that has characterized our elections. I'm really worried about how do we go forward from here? What is going to be? What do we have to do? Is it that we simply over the years? I want to look at this the history of election, not starting from only 2015, or even from 1999. In other words, it's not 20 years ago we started doing elections. Why is it that we have not actually come to terms with the required behavior to have peaceful elections?
Prof, really, it has become a recurring decimal as far as Nigeria is concerned. Even if you go back to 1959 elections,
yes,
and up to Second Republic in the early 80s, late 70s and early 80s, right? So then we had of people pouring acid on opponents. Yeah. Now we have, of course, come to the Fourth Republic in 1999, and from then till now, we're still having this issue of not being able to have a violence-free election in the country. And we have had a program on the role of the political elite in all of this. And that's why I want to ask you this. Now, you have pointed the fact that it is the politicians that should be blamed
Of
for
course.
this. But there are the people who are acting like a desperados, are those who are prepared to pay for thuggery. Thuggery is not just a show. It's something, it's a business that is sponsored.
Yeah.
And during elections, some young men see it as a money-making period. Right. So now, how do we address this? Because if the blame is on politicians, how can it be addressed?
Well, I think that, it's either we do not have, regulations that are strictly adhered to, or we have them and everybody is complacent. And if that is the case, it is really unfortunate. Why then? Because we are now forced to ask the question, why do we have security apparatus in this country if they are not competent enough, to handle this situation? I was reading, quite a lot of literature on what had been put in place. The Inspector General of Police, was quoted as saying that we are prepared. We have done everything that we will need to do to ensure that, the election will be violence-free. But that is not what we got. So the question, therefore, is that to what extent is there a breach, of security arrangement to curb or to prevent, violence from taking place? It's not just. Of course, I've laid squarely the blame on the politicians, but I think we also have to find out exactly how prepared is the state. And when we're talking about the state, specifically the security apparatus we have in this country, is it that they are not also very competent? And what is it that needs to be done? If we cannot go by the, what I will now call traditional mode of election, suggestions have been made, and indeed improvements have been made in other places. I understand in India you can do this thing electronically, election. In Brazil it can be done electronically. Why don't we even think of, adopting a system whereby people do not have to go and be exposed to dangers just because we want to elect leaders? And in fact, what is also painful to me as a political scientist is that we end up even having leaders that are not suitable for the offices they are competing for. These are the issues.
All right, thank you very much, Prof. We'll come back to you. Let's get the thoughts of Rotimi Oyekami. We saw incidences of vote buying in these elections. Not just that we heard, you have pictures everywhere on both sides.
Well, thank you very much. You recall that I think it was during the Ekiti governorship election that this issue came up strongly. Vote buying is not peculiar to these times. It's been on for as long as you can remember, even in the 60s. It's just transforming into different ways. First, why do we have vote buying? It's a pointer to the fact that INEC processes and procedures have greatly improved in such a way that politicians now find that it is very difficult to manipulate the process. So the next alternative is to turn to the voters. And they do that by buying up permanent voters' cards or going to their houses a day before or several days before to induce them, or going to the polling unit area. And when we noticed that, we went to Osun, and in our meeting with the stakeholders, they suggested that, look, ban smartphones from the voting cubicles. And they narrated what they found, that voters will go to the voting cubicle, snap the ballot paper, and then go and show a vote buyer outside and collect some money. And based on the advice, we discussed further with the stakeholders and then agreed that henceforth, smartphones will not be allowed in the voting cubicles. Not just that, any photographic equipment will not be taken in. Now, we didn't ban smartphones around the polling unit area because there's also the people's resource sheet that must be pasted on the polling unit at the close of poll. Now, when you look at what happened in these current elections, I really don't know how widespread it is. You know, we have 21 local governments in Kogi and 8 in Bayelsa. The reports have not indicated that it is widespread across all the local government areas. Now, we work with the EFCC. We enlisted their help. The chairman of INEC, Professor Mahmoud, met with the chair of the EFCC. We also enlisted the help of the ICPC because they are the organizations empowered by the law to track such things, because we were not only concerned about physical vote buying, we are also concerned about online vote buying, and they've been helping us. Now, it's too early to assess the situation because we need to liaise with them and find out what they found, whether some arrests were made, and if those arrests were made, they can give us a report. That we'll still need to find out, but we tried our best. But again, on the social media, you see a lot of pictures, but we also need to tread on the path of caution, because a lot of fake content is unleashed on all of us, and some of the things that people post there are things they retrieve from several years, and one needs to be careful. But I think it's a serious problem, and it's something that we should continually think of how to deal with as move forward.
All right, really, the recent vote buying pattern that we also saw, show and the Kitty, were actually at the polling units. The other one you described was perhaps an arrangement prior to the election, where you negotiate with people that will vote for you and give them money prior to the election. Now, talking about smartphones, which you mentioned, you see, Nigerians keep devising means of countering any kind of regulatory arrangements that you have. The more you bring up a regulation, the better for those people to, think of an alternative, a counter, if you like, or an antidote, to what they have done. So that has continued. But from this election, from all indications, I am not sure that it was so pervasive as we had, Shu and the Kitty in their own elections. But let me ask you this. Since 1999, or rather, I would say from 2015, we have had a number of inconclusive elections by the current INEC, by the current INEC in the country. And just yesterday, we just had that the Kogi West election, that is senatorial election in Kogi West, is also inconclusive. What must have led to this inconclusiveness of elections with respect to what happened yesterday?
Thank you very much. Elections they are legal processes. There is a threshold for declaring results. For governorship, for instance, apart from winning the majority votes, you must win the majority in 2/3 of all the local governments in that state. In the case of Kogi, for you to be governor and deputy governor, you must win the majority overall, and then the majority in 2/3 of the 21 local governments, and all that. Now, what happened in Kogi West is a typical example. The commission does not just declare elections inconclusive. And mind you, maybe a little correction here. It is not this commission that has declared elections inconclusive the most. It happened in the previous election.
It's more with this current one.
Well, you see, inconclusive election is not really a bad thing if you look at it. Look at what happened yesterday. In fact, the media should pay attention to a new trend that I saw. Civil society organizations were calling on INEC to cancel the elections in Kogi on their own.
And even Bayelsa.
That for me is very instructive. That even before we concluded the thing, they held press conferences, and we heard from the Situation Room, we heard from Yearguard calling on INEC to cancel the election. It then meant that they found that there was a lot of interference with these elections. Now, Kogi West had 7 polling units, and there was violence there. And the declaration was that the number of cancelled votes was more than the number of registered voters. Now, let me describe it properly. If there are 5 polling units in a constituency, just for the sake of clarity, and one of them has the highest number of voters, maybe 60% of the voters are in one, and the other 4 share the 40%. Now, the political party that is weak, that knows that the opponent is stronger in that one polling unit, will try to disrupt, that's the pattern, disrupt election in that one with 60% of voters, so that they don't vote or they don't have opportunity to vote. Now, what INEC is saying is that you are wasting your time. At the point of collation, we count. And when we discover that where you disrupted elections, right, the number of registered voters there is is more than the number that we are able to cast their votes in the 4 local governments, we cannot make a return, because the law says that we should go back and give those people that we are deprived the opportunity, the chance to vote. And that's exactly what happened in Kogi West. And we are saying no. It will amount to a nullity for us to declare election where a large number of people were disenfranchised, and in such a way that it affected the overall figure of the election. So that's what leads to inconclusive election. Now that's not INEC. We prepare, we deploy, we are ready to do our job. People come and interfere with our work, and there is a threshold. Now, the implication is that if you declare without following the threshold, somebody will go to court. You know, in this country, politicians are litigation happy, right? They will go to court, and by the time it is subjected to this test of the rule of law, if the court finds that INEC did not follow the rule, the elections will be cancelled and then we'll go back again. So I think rather than blame INEC for inconclusive election, just like the prof said, we should focus on those who disrupt our processes during elections.
We still had some issues of logistics in this election in terms of transportation, especially in Bayelsa. How do you intend to nip that in the bud in future elections?
You know, it's really painful for us as a commission that we still have issues with logistics despite all the plans that we make. Now, let's go to 2019. Logistics, the arrangements were a big issue, forcing us to postpone the election by a week. Now, after that experience, we conducted reviews. You know, we looked at what happened overall and harvested recommendations. We met with our electoral officers, we met with external stakeholders. And these 2 elections that we conducted on the 16th were the first major elections immediately after 2019. And in the last experience, we dealt more with the transport unions for movement of personnel and materials. But because of what we experienced there, we then decided that we would deal with individual transport owners. In the case of Bayelsa, boat owners who were profiled by the security agencies, and then also for the transport owners, vehicle owners for the land parts of the states. But in Bayelsa, something happened. When the REC was interviewed about some of the logistics, from the difficulties in logistics, he said that it has to do with the attitude of Nigerians. Now, you sign an MOU with Mr. A, who has 2 or 3 boats, is to make his boat available at 6 a.m. The thing has been signed and sealed, he's been given advance payment. He doesn't provide his boat until 9 a.m. or 8 a.m. What do? You don't have an alternative, so that delays the process. And it's a chain. Once that is delayed, it's going to delay the opening of polls and all of that. So we don't have the resources to procure everything we need. So we still need to find a way around how do we deal with situation that when we have agreements with these transport private owners, that's what they're going to do. But then we also need to realize that, like Bayelsa, we have declared the result of the election. I don't think that it was so widespread, the issues about logistics, that it was enough to lock down the election and that we could not conclude. But I think those issues are still there and we still need to tackle them.
Okay, let's go back to Prof again. Mr. Oyekami mentioned something very, very pertinent. So that politicians are litigation happy. You know what happened a few days to the election? At that point, Mr. Leon, who eventually won the election in Bayelsa State, was not going to contest in the first place. Right, and just a day to the election as well, there's another court case in Abelo that he's not eligible to contest for the election. Is it part of the antics of politicians, you know?
No, I think, I quite agree with what the Chief Secretary has said about their happiness. I think it's also a subculture of the kind of politics we play in this country. Find a way of either delaying or disrupting the election. And if it means getting your opponent, to be the victim of such tactics. It's quite, it's a good deal. But I think, we should not even harp so much on that. Why I'm saying this is that if people can use legal means, for instance, if there is a genuine case, and somebody has gone to court, and the court has decided that ex-candidate is not qualified to participate in the election, I would not consider that to be a major issue. But my major concern about Nigerian election is what can we do to actually reduce the salience of violence in our elections. That's what what really agitates me in this discussion.
Prof, I'm not cutting you short, but I asked this question because that has a link with the legal system of the country when it concerns elections.
No,
the role of the legal system when it comes to elections, because for instance, we also discussed here about the cost of litigation in the first place. So it has a way of affecting.
There's no doubt about the ripple effect of what action is taken, especially if it is done with the intention of creating confusion or disruption, as I said. Yes. But I'm just saying that if you compare that with a situation where everything has gone according to plans and there's no disruption, nothing. But all the same, on the day of election, we have some of the incidences we're talking about here now. It gives me worry. I mean, it worries me a great deal that in light of everything that the electoral election administration agency has put in place, i.e. INEC has put in place, we still end up having some of the problems we are faced with. I think that should actually be something of a major concern. But the INEC is not the one that will decide X-candidate or Y candidate cannot contest. But an opponent might have seen a loophole and they will try to exploit it. I'm saying that it's still part of the game of politics. But as long as that does not actually create a ripple effect of actually forcing the election to be postponed or to be declared inconclusive and what have you, and we should actually allow such minor incidents. I consider them to be minor incidences. But of course, when people go for litigation, they are the ones to bear the cost. It's not either the INEC, the state, but either their party or the individuals who are taking people to court.
Use state funds to defend themselves in court.
Who?
Well, of course, the incumbent governor, for instance.
I mean, these are some of the corrupt practices that are inherent in our election, and I think the way out of this is to actually, let me just put it this way: it's unfortunate. I do not even see a solution to it because we are talking of the cultivation of certain political culture or habit that is detrimental to what we call democratic politics in any polity. If you are for democracy, then of course there are regulations, there are rules that we all have to observe. First of all, in terms of you have to be of age to participate in a particular election. I mean, to contest a particular office. You have to also meet requirements either in terms of qualification or whether you are, your tax certificates or whatever they call it, are in order and something of that nature. So these are regulations that are already put in place in terms of regulations that are already put in to ensure that people will behave accordingly. But of course, people will always want to look for opportunity or excuses, to actually create a disruption in the whole process.
Prof, let's talk about the issue you says bothers you, and that's the issue of violence.
Yes.
And earlier on, you actually, you made a comment and you said most times when the violence occurs, it's not with the political class themselves or their families. Yeah. It has the ordinary Nigerian, the young man or the young woman who's out there who wants to vote or who's involved in thuggery. The question that comes to mind is, how do we reorient young people, young men, young women, in terms of being against thuggery? You know, how can we reorient them to understand that, look, it's about you. At the end of the day, if the election turns out well, you benefit from this government or you benefit from the administration. But if you're dead, you won't be there anymore.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I think it takes, it requires a lot of, work. And this work that I'm talking about, involves, I think INEC is also involved in it, in terms of how, what role they have to play. I do not know, I don't know precisely now whether it's also the responsibility of INEC to ensure that there is voter education. But let me take this to be the responsibility of the parties. I mean, voter education. What people should learn about voting, who should vote, and what behavior people will have to display, either on election day or even during campaigns. These are things that in mature democracies, people know what role specifically they will have to play. Okay, then the extent of the problem we are having with all these roles, squarely lies with the activities of the politicians themselves. And I say this, very responsibly, because you discover that the politician is desperate. You used the word desperado earlier. They are very desperate to get to this office. And I also said earlier, I'm so even very shocked that some of them will go to office and they cannot even cope with the requirements or the demands of that of such office. So some people are not even competent to go and participate in this election. But therefore, the things that either the parties would have to put in place, like parties should be able to, first of all, know who their genuine members are, because these thugs we're talking about, some of them are actually ad hoc. Let me put it in this way: ad hoc staff of the politicians, if you want to, put it that way, because they are just recruited for that purpose. And the moment election is finished, they discard them. Those who survive. And unfortunately, those who do not survive will not even be around to know what exactly has happened. So I think that there is a role for political parties to play, making sure that they actually know who their genuine members are, and educate them or socialize them into understanding the role they have to play in responsible politics or political roles they have to play. So, and then we will again. There are laws, I think INEC is even thinking of asking the National Assembly to enact a law that will criminalize, some of the people that actually create, these problems during the election. And that, if we do not actually have specific, either a court system or, the provision, legal provision to ensure that, people are actually punished if they create havoc during the election, then I think we are still going to be, held down by, all these negative attitudes towards our politics.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, because part of the questions I was going to ask Mr. Rotimi Oyekami was the issue of, people who have been arrested for violence during elections. I know the DCP is not here, but how many of these cases have you been able to follow up to say, okay, these people have been persecuted?
Well, for the 2019 general election, some electoral offenders were arrested, and the way the law is made is that we are expected to prosecute, but the power to arrest and investigate lies with the police. So we need them to help us. Just about 4 or 5 weeks ago, the police sent some files to the commission about concluded cases of investigation. I mean, the investigation they carried out about those that were arrested during the 2019 general election. So we are going to cooperate with them to prosecute these offenders. But I should also say that we've achieved a level of success in the prosecution of electoral offenders. One good example is the one that took place in Minjibi in Kano, where some hooligans disrupted the election. They were successfully arrested, prosecuted, and jailed. But the commission is not only concerned about the field soldiers. There's what the INEC chairman called the mother spiders. Those who sponsor these stocks should also be taken in. And that brings to the fore what the professor said about this electoral offences tribunal, the court that we are asking the National Assembly to enact. And I think we have promises from the National Assembly that they will expedite action on that particular law.
And that's exactly where I was trying to go. Many Nigerians are actually contributing to this program by way of tweets, and we're going to take the tweets presently. But I want to ask you this, with respect to the electoral laws, with your experience, in INEC, do you really think that there should be new electoral laws, or perhaps restructured electoral laws that can take care of electoral violence, other electoral vices that we've seen play out in Nigerian election? I have to ask this question, because laws alone, in my opinion, cannot change the attitude of the people. It cannot change the attitude of the politicians, who act as if there will be no tomorrow if they don't win elections. Right. So, do you think that's an additional thing that INEC only requires to ensure that we have a free, fair election in this country? Do you need, for instance, electronic voting, as Prof highlighted, that takes place in India, in Brazil, and even some African countries like Rwanda?
The society is dynamic, and we live in dynamic times. Sometimes the law you made yesterday may not be appropriate for what is happening today. We made a lot of recommendations to the National Assembly on what to do to improve the Electoral Act. During public hearings, we made robust contributions. And, before the last assembly closed, we had assurances that these things will be done, but unfortunately, for one reason or the other, it could not be done. So we are going back to the National Assembly to pursue these reforms. Electronic voting is good, but what the law says now is that it should be done manually. So for us to change to electronic voting, they have to amend the law, both the Constitution and the Electoral Act. Now, if you set up a tribunal, for instance, or a special court for electoral offenders, because one of the things we notice is that even all the committees set up by the federal government to look at incidences of electoral violence, they've made this recommendation that we need stronger laws, we need an electoral tribunal to deal with these specific cases. Because when people do things like that, when they commit offenses, when they kill, and they get away with it, they will come back and do it again. Mm-hmm. So our hope is that the National will rise up to the occasion and help us pull this through so that we can begin to hold people accountable for their actions. Not just the field soldiers, not just the thugs that we're talking about, those who sponsor them. Somebody sponsored the thug. Provided weapons, provided money, mobilized them, provided vehicles. Look at what happened in Kogi in some areas. Vehicle came into a particular area and they started shooting and all of that. Who provided that vehicle? Again, I also want to appeal to the media because I'm a journalist. I'm proudly so. I think that it's a multifaceted approach that we should have against electoral violence. Now, the media can set some devices up there to capture real time what is happening on the ground. There are devices you can send up there that you can plant certain drones, right, that can capture. For instance, that vehicle comes in with people, the drone zooms through that vehicle to capture the specific faces.
But can't I install cameras? It's not to install cameras.
Well, elections
are
expensive to conduct as they were. Remember our budget the last time, what people were talking about these figures. If we are going to put cameras in all the polling units in this country, almost 120,000 polling units, that's going to cost some money. The question then becomes, can the country afford to do that? So these are part of the issues.
All right, thank you very much, Prof.
A little input to this issue. I think, the issue about, laws may not change the behaviors of people. Laws are actually very powerful. I think the problem we have in this country is implementation. Always, that is the major problem. I don't even think, the current electoral law we have is not adequate enough to take care of what we are talking about here. Because these are things that actually get repeated one election after the other. So it will have been captured. In fact, we may not need to put in a new, except to, as Mr. Oyekami, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, as he has put it, the society is dynamic. What I think is a particular incidence of violence that we target, or the law has already targeted, may actually be made so sophisticated that we have a different form of it next time when people want to carry out. So I think that what should be the concern of the Nigerian state, and I think, ultimately, whatever it is we suggest or whatever it is the analysis we make here, the Nigerian state has to, sit up and ensure that all the institutions of state are working efficiently. The security has a very major role, fundamental role to play in curbing violence during elections.
All right, thank you very much, Prof. Just as Kieran indicated earlier, we're getting comments, suggestions, and questions via Twitter handle at NTAGMN from our viewers, and I'd like to take them now. The first one is from Abdul. It says some of the election observers should be sanctioned for not telling the truth about the realities on ground. While some of them are calling for cancellation, the real voters are jubilating on the street and accepting the outcome of the elections in good faith.
Now, from Delejak Solomon, where will electoral violence, vote buying, ballot stuffing, and voter intimidation end in Nigeria? We must learn from the developed world. In the U.S., people vote from their bedrooms without going to the polling unit. But all we do in Africa is killing and maiming.
Festus Akimboyewa tweet, it says that desperate politicians will always make it impossible to have peaceful and fair elections in Bayelsa and Kogi in particular, and in Nigeria in general. Our court should also work carefully with their last-minute court orders that is making it difficult for INEC to carry out their task.
Nigeria and its parochial political culture, unless our politicians stop encouraging gambit to achieve their political aims, elections, in spite the modalities put in place, will continue to be in ramshackle directions.
There's so much hype regarding what happened in Kogi, which might not be the reality. The bigger parties were all trying to maneuver each other, which led to some incidents in parts of the state. We must learn to conduct elections peacefully in this country. That's from Abdul.
Yes, but you skipped Michael Omokoji. He said, while I thank INEC for what they did in Kogi and Bayelsa elections, I want to equally appreciate the Nigerian Police Force for the role helicopter played in Kogi.
And Simeon Chris tweet, says, congratulations to the governor-elect David Leon of Bayelsa. We as Lions, okay, please don't round the people, work harder and take Bayelsa to greater heights. Leave a lasting legacy.
Now, Ibrahim Modu Aji, no matter how you deploy security forces, when politicians choose to prevail over the people's choice, violence always characterizes such elections. This is what we saw on the Bayelsa Kogi elections. The problems was always with the desperate politicians.
And finally, this one says, there is no magic INEC or security agencies can perform if the citizens are not ready for a free and fair election. The citizen must be prepared to shun all anti-social behaviors that would bring about disorder and chaotic situations in the conduct of elections. Well, those are the tweets that we have as we...
That last one is a bit controversial. What is it that, we cannot cope? I mean, except we are defining Nigeria to be a lawless country. Or we have less people who can never, submit themselves to law and order. I mean, we people should not be talking as if there are certain things that are not possible. After all, these things are not natural. Violence is actually, conceived and carried out by, as it were, sane people.
Prof,
yes.
Prof, I'm not speaking for him, actually. But you know, when a situation continues to occur in a nation, decades after decades, many people somehow feel that all the hope is lost. Now, when we talked about putting cameras and catching people, he talked about the funds to do that. But you also know that presidential system of government is expensive to run. What Nigeria is expending, keeping the two national assembly and national assembly is huge. No, so I'm not speaking for him, but I'm saying that the possibility of overnight changing and adopting to what the law says could be difficult based on what has been playing out. But before
get your closing thoughts very quickly.
No, what I will simply emphasize that we need to go, to the next level. The next level is to, try to learn from other countries that have been able to bring down the level of violence during election. And what is playing out is simply the fact that, electronic voting is the way out. Nobody is going to tell me that, because of the, large number of illiterate people, we cannot operate this. In fact, when GSM was coming, people thought that, illiterate people would not be able to operate it. I have my stepmother. If I call her, she will easily give it to, somebody who is literate in the house. Who is calling? And they say, oh, your son is the one calling. And she will now know that, of course, if she could not get it in time from my voice, she will now know who is calling, and she will, we would be able to communicate effectively. But that is not to say that, because of the sanctity of election, which is meant to be, private and not, we don't divulge who we are voting for, can be amenable to this kind of, but the fact of the matter is that to the extent that those who want to vote and to elect their leaders want to do it free of violence, everybody will learn the technology of using
just your thoughts on what happened in Bayelsa. Just in 1 or 2. The PDP lost that state yesterday, and people were jubilating for that. Is that a healthy development?
Yeah, you see, let me before I come to answer the question. The answer is yes anyway. But let me put it this way: what culture is emerging in Nigeria now? We are having a situation where a governor who is who is leaving office, is creating a kind of dynasty. Either the wife or the son-in-law or the son-in-law or even the son, is prepared to succeed the governor. So we do not know whether people even define democracy to be dynasty or monarchy. So if we are having what we witnessed in Bayelsa, and in any case during the general election earlier this year, some states actually also fell by the wayside to the opposition. Okay, so I think it's a healthy development.
All right, Rotimi, you're coming very quickly, just 30 seconds. Let's get your final thoughts, please.
Well, I think that INEC will continue to do its best for elections in this country. We prepare very hard, and it costs a lot of money to conduct elections in this country, and we require the cooperation of all stakeholders. When you allow INEC to deploy, to conduct elections properly, you don't interfere, we make a declaration. So we also want to appeal to political actors to please, just resort to peaceful conduct of elections, and the voters to also come out to vote during the election rather than stay at home.
All right. Thank you very much, Rotimi Oyekami, Chief Press Secretary to the INEC Chairman. Thank you for coming on the program. And also a very big thank you to Professor Nuhu Yakubu, a political scientist and former Vice Chancellor, University of Abuja. Thank you very much for coming. Gentlemen, thank you for your thoughts and your time on the program this morning.
It's my pleasure.
All right, we'll take a short break now, and when we come back, we'll be discussing the national campaign against open defecation, and the Honourable Minister for Water Resources, Engineer Suleiman Adamu, will be joining us.
Meet the dreamer. Meet stylish. Meet the bold. Meet the inquisitive. Meet the warrior. Meet the master. Meet the realist. The challenge is coming. Unity Charlie. Power, development, and peace. Coming soon.
Can I see your particulars, sir?
Officer, my particulars today here.
In that case, you'll have to come with me to the police station.
Officer, which levels? Where I for find you something make you take arrange your weekend.
What? Offense number 1, driving without particulars. Offense number 2, trying to bribe an officer of the law.
I won't harass Nigerians or take bribe. Change begins with me.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
You're still watching Good Morning Nigeria. We're live on the network service of the NTA. I indicated earlier that we have another conversation, and that's on the issue of a campaign against open defecation in Nigeria. Just as I indicated earlier, we have the Honorable Minister of Water Resources, Engineer Suleiman Adamu, here with us this morning. Honorable Minister, you're welcome to the program.
Thank you. Good morning.
Yes, it's good to have you again on this show.
Thank you.
And this time around, we're talking about open defecation. Well, we have known, historically speaking, that there are many so-called third world countries, who have had this issue of open defecation for a very long time. A country like India, I'm sure, has already come out of that. But now that you are running a campaign against that, how bad is open defecation in Nigeria?
Well, it's very, very bad, honestly. 7 million Nigerians, that's 24% of our population, are practicing open defecation. The largest concentration is the north-central geopolitical zone. Lowest is in the northwest. The major problem is that it's not necessarily the absence of toilet facilities in public places, but there are still some cultures in this country that believe that open defecation is really not a big deal. And therefore, they don't even see the point in building toilets in their houses and so on. They just take it for granted that once you feel like relieving yourself, you just go into the bush. So is this cultural attitude that makes it even worse, and this is something that we need to tackle.
Well, you just spoke to us now on why it's part of the reasons why it's still rampant in our culture, in our system. But then the issue we're discussing is on a campaign against it. What is the target for that, to achieve that?
Well, Nigeria subscribed to the Sustainable Development Goals, and Goal 6.2 talks about the need to have a society that where sanitation is there's 100% sanitation access, along with 6.1 for water supply. So Nigeria has subscribed to that, and therefore in 2016 we developed a roadmap to end open defecation by 2025. The target for SDGs is 2030, but we want to do it 5 years earlier. So before the roadmap, we also launched what we call the P-WASH program, Partnership for Expanded Water Supply, Sanitation and Hygiene, to improve access for water and sanitation to rural communities. This came about because under the Millennium Development Goals, we didn't do well in terms of sanitation at all. So, and we didn't even meet the targets for water supply at that time, but although we did fairly well in terms of access to water, 50% of the rural population was found not to have access to adequate water supply. So we established the P-WASH program and subsequently launched the roadmap against open defecation. Because Nigeria is ranking #1 in Africa. Some years ago, Nigeria was #6 worldwide. Over time, other countries took concerted efforts to take themselves out of the practice, which saw Nigeria going up the ladder. We got to #2. And because India launched a massive program, like you mentioned, it's almost exited. 99.9% of the population in India are no longer practicing open defecation. That translates to about over between 5 and 700 million people. So we kept going. We also developed the Wash Action Plan, which was launched by President Buhari on November 8th last year, during which time we also declared a state of emergency on water and sanitation. All this have efforts to ginger people to stop the practice, improve on sanitation, especially at state and local government level. So these are some of the efforts. Then we came on, Federal Executive Council approved in April a national campaign against open defecation, which is what we're about to launch tomorrow. Okay. So far, there's been good reception from most of the states. They've also gone ahead to declare a state of emergency on water and sanitation. And we're beginning to see states legislating against open defecation.
Is there a slogan for this, and how long will it subsist?
Well, we call it Clean Nigeria, Use the Toilet. This campaign against open defecation is a subset of the entire sanitation program, but it's the most important, because if we get people to stop this practice, there's a tremendous impact on sanitation and therefore on health of individuals. And we hope, like I said, continue this campaign, hoping to end it by 2025, so that we can declare Nigeria open defecation free. As at now, only about 14 or 15 local governments in the country are open defecation free, although we have over 20,000 communities. But if we continue like we have 774 local governments, so we still have a long way to go.
Yes, a pretty long way, if you ask me, because you gave an explanation that it is more or less, experienced in the north central area of Nigeria more than other parts of the country. But I can assure you that if you go down to the southeast or south of Nigeria, it's also a cultural practice. And I want to come from that angle of culture, because that's what we're going to address first of all, for people to now understand the need to even, not do that. Because in one of the programs that I watched on one of the foreign media, people enjoy doing that. They enjoy doing that. You could be there with your friend, and you'll be there on one side or there on the other side, and you'll be chatting and doing that. So it's a culture. How do you address the cultural component of it? Because that is the beginning. And we're talking about Nigerians at the lowest level.
Well, yes, it's a culture. But let me say that although I said it's predominantly in this north central region, there is no community in this country where you don't get the practice of open defecation. So the other regions should not feel comfortable because the practice is prevalent. Only that statistically, you have a difference. Now, our approach is through what we call community-led total sanitation. And the whole aim is to have a behavioral change. You can't coerce people. What you can do is you do advocacy, you do some litigation. It's a carrot and stick approach, so that people now know. If you think that you take it for granted that you can defecate openly, now the authorities are telling you that it is illegal for you to do that. But then the most important thing is for each and everybody to understand the need to stop the practice. It affects you, it affects your family, it affects your community. If people understand the dangers associated with open defecation, it helps to change their behavior. So the campaigns we are doing, and all the local governments where we've been successful, we've tested the method, this community-led total sanitation, and it's working. So that's the approach we want to take. And we want individuals to take responsibility, because your personal health and personal hygiene are your personal responsibility. Once the advocacy sinks in, and we know we have a very good communication strategy that shows people, that explains to people the dangers of this practice, I think we are going to succeed. I am confident that at some point we no longer need to have jingles, we no longer need to be throwing pamphlets and so on. People will
kind of embed this course in their minds and soul, so that they rid themselves of the practice. And we are working in schools, with school children, with women in particular, because women, I think, have a very important role to play. I've seen how successful women have led this sanitation in Cross River State. They are the most vulnerable when it comes to the practice of open defecation. They're susceptible to assaults and attacks and rape, when they go into the forest or into the bush to do their business. So girls don't go to school when they have their menstrual cycle, because there's no sanitation facility for them. So we're also going to use, I think women are a very potent force to help in this campaign.
Is there a possibility of an executive order on open defecation?
Absolutely. There is an executive order that is before the president, and it's going to be signed very soon. And that executive order will require first of all, to promulgate this campaign against open defecation, and then also to kind of enable security agencies to be able to make arrests where they find practices like this, and a host of other things, including the need for government agencies and even commercial agencies to provide public toilet facilities and to provide facilities for their staff.
All right, sir. There's an angle I'd like us to take this. I was privileged to be in Stockholm in 2014 during the Water Week, and this issue of open defecation came up, with some ideas on how it could be tackled in the third world countries. And one of such is a sanitary inspection. We used to have sanitary inspectors of those days, who go from house to house to inspect the houses and see how, people are maintaining cleanliness in their homes. And again, what is the role of state government and of course local government here? Because these are in the council areas where we have the majority of Nigerians who are actually practicing this very culture we're talking about. So what would be the role of state and local governments in this direction, even if it comes up at from the presidency as a presidential order?
Yeah, I thank you very much for this question, because most programs that have been put in place by the federal government, the challenge has been translating them at subnational level. The WASH action plan that was launched by the president last year provides specific roles for the federal government and the states. And this WASH action plan and the roadmap against open defecation and all the things that we've been doing, including P-WASH, were brought together, were coupled together along with representation from the states and the local governments. But I understand and I agree with you, and that is why this campaign, we want the states to drive it at the end of the day, because that's where the people are.
How do you intend to implement it, especially at the subnational level?
Well, at the campaign tomorrow, we expect governors will come and they will make a commitment. And like I've said, we have shared all this, the whole plan with them. I have addressed governors at least 3 times on this issue. And like I said, also many states have begun to declare a state of emergency on on water, sanitation and hygiene, and that is a good sign, which wasn't there before. They may not be operating at the same pace, but some states are doing fantastically well. Even before the launching, people are working. So it's a 5-6 year program. I'm sure when people see the benefits, for instance, like in Cross River State, when a few communities saw what was happening in the other communities, that there, the cases of diarrhea and child mortality had improved, the statistics had improved. They started coming to the communities to ask what is happening. And then before you knew it, it was a chain reaction. And within a very short time, the entire local government was ODF, open defecation free. Yes, so we expect states to have, once the state governments, especially the governors, have the political will to drive this, I think everything will be fine. The local government, each local government, we are having what we call WASH comps. These are committees on water and sanitation. Those states that don't have it, we're trying to encourage them to create them And these are the ones that will go about, maybe through that you have all the sanitary inspectors that we used to have before. But this project has to be driven, this campaign has to be driven by the states, and we're going to work closely with them.
Finally, let's get your closing thoughts. And then you talked about a program for tomorrow.
Yes, of course. Tomorrow, 19th November, is designated by the United Nations as the World Toilet Day. So we're using tomorrow, that day, 19th November, to have this national launch on open defecation. It's going to be done at Eagle Square at 10 o'clock. Like I said, state governors will be there. We expect them to make a commitment, and we'll unveil the logo, and then that's flags of the campaign. It's not the end of things, it's the beginning. And once we start, we're going to continue to roll it.
All right, Honorable Minister, well, I wish you well, because when I put my thoughts back, I will recall how it is to engage in open defecation, and I'm sure that many are not in a hurry to leave that. So we have a lot of jobs to do to convince people, especially those who have been properly acculturated in that. It's always difficult. Yeah. So at this point, we'd like to thank you so much for sharing your time with us, and of course explaining to Nigerians the need for us to campaign against open defecation. Thank you so much. And it will surprise you to know that even in Abuja, where we live, sometimes you'll be doing the expressway. You look left or right, you see somebody doing it in the Abuja, capital city of Nigeria.
Definitely.
And of course, it's not a good news. All right. Okay. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.
All right. Well, good morning, Nigeria. We are actually winding down for now. Let's go sports.
Victor Osimhen netted a brace and also got 2 assists in a roller coaster game in the 2021 AFCON qualifying match against Lesotho at the Setsoto Stadium in Maseru. It started off nervy for the Eagles, who went behind inside 11 minutes after striker Masuabi Nkoto beat William Troost Ekong in the air and Daniel Akpeyi in goal to put the hosts ahead. But the 3-time African champions turned up the heat, and before the break had responded in kind through Alexi Wobi in the 26th minute and Samuel Chukwueze in the 38th minute. Winger Ahmed Musa replaced goalscorer Chukwueze, and Ramon Aziz came on for Joe Aribo. Those changes brought extra verve to the Eagles, who took flight with Osimhen latching onto a beautiful pass from left-back Ola Aina to beat the Lesotho goalkeeper. Ramon, as his turning provider for Osimhen, took the opportunity with a plumb for his second of the game and third in the qualifiers. Sunday's results thus ensures Nigeria keeps a perfect record from 2 games and extend their lead in Group L. Meanwhile, Nigeria has booked its place in next year's Women's Olympic qualifying tournament following a 74-59 win over Mali in the semi-final of the Pre-Women Olympic qualifying tournament on Sunday in Maputo. In a repeat of the 2019 Afro-Basket Women Championship semi-final, where the Tigers won 79-58 points, Hugh Gliotis' side showed no signs of letting up on Sunday as they took their winning streak on the continent to 13 games. They dominated the first half and the third quarter, winning 14-11, 20-14 and 25-14, but took their foot off the gas to allow Mali some breathing space in the fourth, 15-20. Nigeria will now compete in the 16-team Women Olympic qualifying tournament from February 6th to 9th, 2020.
All right, and that does it on Good Morning Nigeria today. We thank you for watching. Tomorrow morning, bright and early, 7 a.m., the program returns. I'm Rhoda Anonam. Do enjoy the rest of your day.
And I'm Kieran Numaya. Thank you for your time. We'll see you again tomorrow.